In a small, quiet town surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, there lived a man named Arthur Langston. He was no ordinary man. He was a millionaire, known far and wide for his immense wealth. But unlike most rich people who threw extravagant parties or mingled with celebrities, Arthur preferred solitude. His mansion stood atop a hill overlooking the town, its grand architecture both awe-inspiring and slightly intimidating. People often whispered about him in hushed tones. Some said he was strange, others claimed he was brilliant. One thing everyone agreed on, though, was that Arthur had more money than anyone could ever spend in a lifetime. For decades, Arthur kept to himself, rarely seen outside his estate except for occasional trips into town to buy supplies or visit the library. No one knew much about his personal life. He had no wife, no children, and very few friends, if any at all. Over time, curiosity about what would happen to his fortune grew stronger among the townsfolk. What will he do with all that money when he's gone? They wondered aloud. Would it go to charity, to distant relatives, or would it simply disappear along with him? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. One crisp autumn morning, news spread. Like wildfire through the sleepy town, Arthur Langston had passed away. At 78 years old, his death wasn't entirely unexpected, but it still sent shockwaves through the community. Everyone wanted to know what would become of his vast fortune. Lawyers arrived at the mansion within days, poring over documents and preparing for the reading of the will. The entire town buzzed with speculation. Finally, the day of the will reading arrived. Dozens of curious onlookers gathered outside the mansion gates, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of anything unusual. Inside, however, things were far from ordinary. Instead of family members or close acquaintances sitting in the opulent drawing room, strangers from all corners of the globe filled the seats. There were young entrepreneurs dressed in sharp suits, retired adventurers with weathered faces, struggling artists clutching sketchbooks, and even a former chess champion whose name still echoed in tournament halls. Each person looked out of place yet eager, clutching identical envelopes stamped with Arthur's initials. The atmosphere was tense as Mr. Pembroke, Arthur's longtime lawyer, stepped forward. A tall, stern-looking man with silver hair and glasses perched on the edge of his nose, he commanded attention without saying a word. Clearing his throat, he began speaking in a calm but firm voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, addressing the room, "you have been summoned here today because Arthur Langston left explicit instructions regarding the distribution of his estate." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Many leaned forward, intrigued. Mr. Pembroke continued, "Contrary to popular belief, this inheritance is not merely a matter of wealth. It is also a test, a challenge designed to determine who among you possesses the qualities necessary to carry on Arthur's legacy." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Only those who demonstrate wisdom, courage, and integrity will inherit this fortune." Gasps erupted around the room. Some attendees exchanged nervous glances, while others straightened up, determined to prove themselves worthy. Before anyone could ask questions, Mr. Pembroke handed out sealed envelopes containing their first task. "You will find instructions inside," he explained. "Follow them carefully and remember, this is not just about intelligence or luck. It is about character." Once dismissed, the participants retreated to various corners of the mansion to open their envelopes. Inside each one was a detailed map leading to an abandoned village deep in the forest. Alongside the map was a cryptic note: "Solve the riddle." Engraved on the stone monument within 48 hours. Failure means elimination. Excitement mixed with apprehension as the group prepared for the journey ahead. Some formed alliances immediately, pooling resources and discussing strategies. Others chose to keep to themselves, wary of trusting strangers. By late afternoon, they set off together, following the winding paths marked on the map. The trek proved challenging almost instantly. Thick vines blocked their way, forcing them to hack through with makeshift tools. Mosquitoes swarmed relentlessly, leaving red welts on exposed skin. The air grew heavier with every step, and the dense canopy above filtered sunlight into eerie patterns on the forest floor. Conversation dwindled as fatigue set in, replaced by the constant crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of unseen birds. After hours of hiking, they finally reached the abandoned village just as twilight painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. The once bustling settlement now lay in ruins, its wooden houses crumbling and overtaken by nature. At the center of the square stood a stone monument, partially covered in moss. Participants gathered around it, brushing away dirt and debris, to reveal an inscription carved into the surface. What is seen once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years. Silence fell over the group as they stared at the riddle. For several moments no one spoke. Then slowly debates erupted. Some suggested it was a trick question, while others furiously jotted down ideas in notebooks. Arguments broke out, tempers flared, and alliances shifted like sand dunes in a storm. Amidst the chaos, Clara, a soft-spoken librarian from Chicago, noticed something odd. She knelt closer to the monument, running her fingers over the carvings. Beneath the riddle, faintly etched into the stone, she spotted a single letter, M. Her eyes widened as realization dawned. Standing up, she addressed the group calmly. "I think I figured it out," she said, holding up the map. "The answer is the letter M. It appears once in minute, twice in moment, and never in 1,000 years." Her announcement sparked a mix of reactions. Some nodded in agreement, impressed by her observation skills. Others grumbled, accusing her of withholding information earlier. Despite the tension, Clara urged the group to work together. "We're stronger as a team," she insisted. "Let's focus on solving this puzzle so we can move forward." Not everyone shared her sentiment. Victor, a brash businessman with slicked back hair and an arrogant demeanor, rolled his eyes. "Teamwork?" he scoffed. "This is a competition. If you're so clever, why didn't you speak up sooner?" Without waiting for a response, he stormed off toward the edge of the village, muttering under his breath. As night descended, casting long shadows across the ruins, an unsettling feeling settled over the group. Strange noises echoed through the trees, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, and faint whispers carried by the wind. Though exhausted, no one dared sleep. They huddled together around a makeshift fire, sharing stories to distract themselves from the eerie atmosphere. Hours later, a blood-curdling scream shattered the fragile peace. Startled, the group scrambled to their feet and rushed toward the source of the sound. What they found chilled them to the bone. Victor lay sprawled on the ground near the forest's edge, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. When questioned, he stammered about shadowy figures watching him from the trees. Whether it was paranoia or something more sinister, no one could say for sure. Despite the scare, the group decided to stay put until morning. Clara tended to Victor, offering reassurance and water, though he refused to meet her gaze. As the fire crackled and died down, the participants couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest seemed alive, its secrets hidden, just beyond reach. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of their journey. Arthur Langston's tests were designed not just to challenge their intellect, but to reveal their true selves, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And as the first night drew to a close, each participant realized they were playing a game far bigger than any of them had imagined. The morning sun filtered weakly through the dense canopy, casting long shadows across the abandoned village. The participants stirred groggily, their bodies stiff from sleeping on hard ground and their minds heavy with unease. The events of the previous night still lingered in the air. Victor's scream, the eerie noises, and the feeling of being watched had left everyone unsettled. Yet there was no time to dwell on fear. The clock was ticking, and they had less than 48 hours to solve the riddle inscribed on the stone monument. Clara was already up, pacing near the monument as she studied it intently. Her calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the frazzled energy of the others. She had spent most of the night thinking about the riddle, turning over every possibility in her mind. Though she had solved it earlier by noticing the faint carving of the letter M, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this puzzle than met the eye. Something about the monument felt off. "Are you sure we're done here?" asked a wiry man named Daniel, his voice tinged with impatience. A former chess champion, he was used to solving problems quickly and efficiently. This slow unraveling of clues didn't sit well with him. We've got the answer, haven't we? Let's just move on. Clara shook her head. It doesn't feel right, she replied softly. This monument, it's too elaborate for such a simple riddle. There has to be something else. Her words drew skeptical glances from the group. Some muttered under their breath, dismissing her caution as unnecessary delay. Others nodded reluctantly, willing to entertain the idea if it meant avoiding mistakes later. After all, none of them wanted to risk elimination so early in the game. As Clara circled the monument, her sharp eyes caught details others had missed. Tiny symbols etched into the base of the stone seemed to form a pattern, a series of arrows pointing inward toward the center. Kneeling down, she traced the markings with her fingers, trying to make sense of them. Look at this, she called, out, beckoning the group closer. These arrows, they might be leading us somewhere. Victor, who had regained some composure after his terrifying encounter the previous night, sneered. You're wasting our time, he snapped. We've already solved the riddle. Why are you dragging this out? Ignoring his hostility, Clara continued examining the base of the monument. With careful effort, she pressed one of the symbols, an arrow carved into the stone, and heard a faint click. The ground beneath the monument trembled slightly, and a hidden compartment slid open, revealing a small brass key. The group erupted into murmurs of surprise. Even Victor looked momentarily stunned. How did you know to do that? Asked Sarah, a young artist clutching her sketchbook tightly. Her wide eyes reflected both admiration and disbelief. I didn't, Clara admitted with a shrug. I just followed the clues. Sometimes you have to trust what's in front of you instead of jumping to conclusions. The key was cold to the touch, its surface engraved with intricate patterns resembling vines. Attached to it was a rolled-up piece of parchment tied with a thin red ribbon. Unfurling it carefully, Clara read aloud. To proceed, unlock the gate where light meets shadow. Confusion rippled through the group. What does that even mean? Demanded Victor, his frustration boiling over. Light meets shadow? That could be anywhere. Daniel stepped forward, his analytical mind already working. It's probably another location, he said. We need to figure out where light and shadow converge naturally. Maybe it's a specific spot in the village or nearby. Clara agreed. Let's split up and search, she suggested. But stay within shouting distance. We don't know what else is out here. Though hesitant, the group divided into pairs, each heading in different directions. Clara partnered with Sarah, while Daniel teamed up with Victor. As they fanned out across the village, the oppressive silence returned, broken only by the crunch of leaves and occasional bird calls. Clara and Sarah wandered past crumbling cottages, their walls covered in ivy and moss. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the trees, creating patches of brightness on the forest floor. In one particularly striking area, beams of light illuminated a narrow path flanked by towering oak trees. Shadows stretched long and deep, intertwining, with the light in a mesmerizing dance. This must be it, Clara whispered, her voice filled with awe. She approached the spot cautiously, holding the brass key aloft. Sure enough, embedded in the trunk of an ancient tree was a small iron lock. It blended seamlessly with the bark, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Sarah watched nervously as Clara inserted the key into the lock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft creak, the tree shifted slightly, revealing a concealed opening in its base. Inside was a wooden box lined with velvet. Nestled within was another map, along with a note written in elegant script. Congratulations on finding your way. But remember, true challenges lie not in puzzles, but in people. Trust wisely. Clara's hands trembled as she handed the note to Sarah. It's like Arthur is speaking directly to us, she murmured. He's testing more than just our ability to solve riddles. He wants to see how we treat each other. Meanwhile, Daniel and Victor had stumbled upon a similar discovery, a locked chest buried beneath a pile of fallen leaves. However, their dynamic was far less harmonious. Victor insisted on taking charge, barking orders at Daniel, and refusing to share any insights he gleaned from the clues. When the chest finally opened, revealing yet another map and note identical to Clara's, tensions between the two reached a breaking point. "You're impossible to work with," Daniel exclaimed, throwing up his hands in exasperation. "If we weren't stuck together, I'd leave you behind without a second thought." Victor smirked. "Good thing we are stuck together then, isn't it? Because I'm not carrying your weight." Their argument carried back to Clara and Sarah, who exchanged worried glances. "We need to regroup," Clara said firmly. "Splitting up isn't helping anyone." Reluctantly, the four reunited at the stone monument. Clara took charge, spreading out the new maps and comparing notes. Both sets led to the same destination, a cave located deeper in the forest. But the journey promised to be treacherous. Steep cliffs, dense underbrush, and unpredictable wildlife awaited them. As they prepared to leave, Victor made a bold move. Grabbing one of the maps, he announced, "I'm going ahead alone. If you want to keep up, fine. Otherwise, don't waste my time." Before anyone could stop him, he stormed off, disappearing into the trees. The remaining three exchanged uneasy looks. "Should we follow him?" Sarah asked hesitantly. Clara shook her head. "No, he's made his choice. Our best bet is to stick together and stay cautious." And so the trio set off, leaving Victor to fend for himself. The path grew increasingly difficult as they ventured deeper into the forest. Roots snaked across the trail, forcing them to climb over obstacles. Thick fog rolled in, obscuring visibility and dampening their spirits. Yet despite the challenges, a sense of camaraderie began to form among Clara, Sarah, and Daniel. They shared food, offered encouragement, and worked together to navigate hazards. At one point, they encountered a collapsed bridge spanning a narrow ravine. Crossing it required balancing precariously on rotting planks suspended high above jagged rocks. Sarah froze halfway across, paralyzed by fear. Clara stayed close behind, calmly guiding her step by step until they reached the other side safely. Daniel, who had crossed first, extended a hand to help them up. "Thanks," Sarah said, breathlessly, her face pale but grateful. "I don't think I could have done that without you guys." Clara smiled warmly. "That's why we're a team. We lift each other up when things get tough." By late afternoon, they arrived at the mouth of the cave described in the map. Its entrance loomed ominously, shrouded in darkness. Inside, faint echoes suggested the presence of water dripping from stalactites. Taking a deep breath, Clara led the way, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. Victor, meanwhile, had reached the cave hours earlier but found himself hopelessly lost. His arrogance and refusal to collaborate had cost him dearly. Exhausted and disoriented, he stumbled blindly through the tunnels, calling out for help that never came. Back with Clara's group, the final clue awaited them, a glowing crystal embedded in the cave wall. Beneath it was an inscription. "Only those who value unity over ambition may claim their reward." Without hesitation, Clara placed her hand on the crystal, triggering a mechanism that illuminated the entire cavern. A hidden passageway revealed itself, leading upward toward daylight. As they emerged from the cave, the sight that greeted them took their breath away. Spread out below was a breathtaking view of the valley, bathed in golden sunlight. In the distance, Arthur's mansion stood tall against the horizon, its windows gleaming like beacons. Though weary and battered, Clara, Sarah, and Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had passed the first major test, not just by solving puzzles, but by proving their ability to trust and support one another. Somewhere, Arthur Langston's spirit smiled, knowing his legacy was in capable hands. But the journey was far from over. Each step brought them closer to the ultimate prize, and the ultimate challenge. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the valley in hues of orange and purple. Clara, Sarah, and Daniel stood at the edge of the forest, catching their breath after the grueling trek from the cave. The view of Arthur's mansion, glowing in the distance, filled them with a mix of relief and anticipation. They had made it through 2 challenging tests, but none of them dared to relax. Each step forward felt like walking deeper into uncharted territory, where danger lurked around every corner. As they began descending the hill toward the mansion, the air grew colder, carrying with it an unsettling stillness. The chirping of birds and rustling of leaves that had accompanied them earlier were replaced by an eerie silence. Even the wind seemed hesitant to move, as if holding its breath. Sarah wrapped her arms tightly around herself, not just for warmth, but also for comfort. "Do you feel it too?" she whispered, glancing nervously at Clara and Daniel. "Feel what?" Daniel asked, though his tone betrayed his own unease. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. "It's like we're being watched," Sarah admitted quietly. Her voice trembled slightly, and she hugged her sketchbook closer to her chest as if it could shield her from whatever unseen force was lingering nearby. Clara nodded slowly, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows cast by the towering trees. She didn't dismiss Sarah's concerns. Instead, she shared them. Ever since entering the forest days ago, there had been moments when the hairs on the back of her neck stood up, warning her of something, or someone, just out of sight. But now the sensation was stronger than ever. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. They pressed on cautiously, staying close together. The path wound through dense underbrush, forcing them to push aside thick branches and duck under low-hanging vines. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sent their hearts racing. Was it just the forest coming alive at dusk, or was something else following them? Suddenly, Daniel stopped dead in his tracks, his hand shooting out to grab Clara's arm. "Did you hear that?" he hissed, his voice barely audible. Clara froze, straining her ears. At first, all she heard was the faint hum of insects and the distant hoot of an owl. Then, unmistakably, came the sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping, almost like footsteps, slowly, deliberately, moving closer. Without speaking, the trio exchanged tense glances. Instinctively, they huddled together, backs pressed against one another as they scanned the darkness surrounding them. The tapping grew louder, more distinct. Whatever or whoever it was approaching fast. "Should we run?" Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. "No," Clara replied firmly, though her heart pounded in her chest. "If we run blindly, we'll only get lost. Or worse, we need to stay calm and figure out where it's coming from." Daniel nodded reluctantly and reached for the flashlight clipped to his belt. Flicking it on, he swept the beam across the trees. For a moment, nothing appeared. But then, just beyond the reach of the light, a shadow shifted. It was tall and slender, its form distorted by the dim glow of the flashlight. As soon as the light touched it, the figure darted backward, disappearing into the blackness. "What the hell was that?" Daniel muttered, lowering the flashlight slightly. His knuckles whitened as he gripped it tighter. "I don't know," Clara said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. "But I think we should keep moving. Staying here isn't safe." With renewed urgency, they continued down the path, quickening their pace without breaking into a full sprint. The tapping resumed behind them, keeping a consistent distance as if stalking them. Every few minutes they would catch fleeting glimpses of the shadowy figure darting between trees, always just out of reach. Sarah stumbled over a root, letting out a startled yelp. Clara immediately helped her up, her hands steady even as her pulse raced. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Sarah nodded, though tears glistened in her eyes. "I'm fine, just scared." "We're going to be all right," Clara reassured her, squeezing her shoulder gently. "Stick together and we'll make it through this." Despite her words, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded somewhere. The path ahead narrowed significantly, flanked by jagged rocks and tangled roots. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy above, plunging them into near-total darkness. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on their shoulders, making each step feel like wading through molasses. Finally, they emerged into a small clearing illuminated by pale moonlight. In the center stood a weathered wooden cabin, its windows dark and door slightly ajar. The sight was both inviting and foreboding. Clara hesitated, unsure whether to approach or avoid it entirely. "We can't keep running forever," Daniel said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Maybe this place will give us shelter until morning." Clara bit her lip, weighing the risks. Something about the cabin felt wrong. Too convenient, too isolated. Yet the alternative was continuing to wander aimlessly in the dark while being pursued by an unknown entity. Reluctantly, she nodded. "All right, let's check it out. But stay alert." Pushing the creaky door open, they stepped inside cautiously. The interior was musty and cluttered, filled with old furniture covered in dust. A rickety table stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by mismatched chairs. On the far wall hung a cracked mirror, its surface reflecting their weary faces in fragmented pieces. As they explored further, Clara noticed something odd about the mirror. Unlike the rest of the cabin, it seemed oddly clean, free of dust or cobwebs. Stepping closer, she examined her reflection and gasped. For a split second, she saw not her own face, but someone else's staring back at her. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her shaken. "Did you see that?" she whispered, turning to the others. "See what?" Daniel asked, frowning. Before Clara could explain, Sarah screamed. They spun around to find her pointing at the floorboards beneath their feet. Etched into the wood was a series of symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. They formed a pattern resembling a labyrinth with arrows pointing inward toward the center. "It's another clue," Clara realized, kneeling beside the markings. Running her fingers over them, she triggered a mechanism hidden within the floor. With a groan, part of the wooden planks slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward into darkness. "Well, that's not creepy at all," Daniel muttered sarcastically, peering into the abyss below. "What do you want to bet this ends badly?" Clara ignored his sarcasm and retrieved her flashlight. "We don't have a choice. If this is part of the test, we need to follow it." Taking a deep breath, they descended the stairs one by one, the air growing colder and damper with each step. At the bottom, they found themselves in a cavernous chamber lit by flickering torches mounted on the walls. In the center of the room stood a pedestal holding a single object, an ornate hourglass filled with shimmering sand. A note rested beside it, written in Arthur's familiar, elegant script. "Time reveals truth. Turn the hourglass to reveal your next trial." Clara hesitated, her hand hovering over the hourglass. "This feels important. Like it's not just about solving puzzles anymore." "Everything feels important," Daniel grumbled, though his tone lacked conviction. He glanced around the chamber nervously, clearly uncomfortable. With a deep breath, Clara turned the hourglass. The sand began to flow, casting golden reflections across the room. Almost instantly, the walls shifted, revealing rows of mirrors, lining the space. Each mirror reflected a distorted version of reality. Some showed the participants as kings and queens surrounded by wealth, while others depicted them as failures, destitute, and broken. The illusions played on their deepest desires and fears, pulling at their emotions like invisible strings. Sarah clutched her sketchbook tightly, her face pale as she stared at her reflection. In one mirror, she saw herself standing on a stage, receiving applause for her artwork. In another, she saw blank canvases mocking her lack of talent. Tears welled up in her eyes as she struggled to look away. Daniel paced anxiously, muttering to himself as he confronted images of triumph and defeat. One mirror showed him winning a prestigious chess tournament, while another revealed him losing repeatedly to opponents half his age. His frustration bubbled over and he slammed his fist against the glass, causing it to crack. Clara, however, remained composed. She studied each reflection carefully, searching for inconsistencies. Eventually, she identified a subtle flaw in one of the mirrors, the cracks in the glass, the unnatural angles. This one, she realized, held the key to escaping the chamber. Without hesitation, she smashed the false mirror with a nearby rock, triggering a hidden door to swing open. Beyond it lay a tunnel leading upward, bathed in soft blue light. The trio exchanged relieved smiles, their bond stronger than ever after, facing their inner demons together. As they climbed toward freedom, they couldn't help but wonder what awaited them next, and whether they had truly conquered their greatest fears. Somewhere in the shadows, the mysterious figure that had been following them lingered, watching silently. Its purpose remained unclear, but one thing was certain. Arthur Langston's tests were far from over. The tunnel stretched upward, its walls smooth and cool to the touch. Blue light illuminated their path, casting an ethereal glow that made shadows dance behind them. Clara, Sarah, and Daniel climbed cautiously, their footsteps echoing softly, in the narrow passage. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from physical exhaustion, but from the weight of what they had just endured. The mirror chamber had forced them to confront their deepest fears and desires, leaving them emotionally drained yet strangely clearer about who they were. As they reached the end of the tunnel, a wooden door appeared before them. Unlike the heavy, ominous doors they had encountered earlier, this one seemed almost inviting. Its surface was polished to a shine, with intricate carvings of vines and flowers etched into the wood. In the center was a brass handle shaped like a keyhole, glowing faintly as if beckoning them forward. Clara hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the handle. "Ready?" she asked, glancing back at Sarah and Daniel. "As ready as I'll ever be," Daniel replied, his voice tinged with both sarcasm and determination. He adjusted his backpack, which had grown lighter as supplies dwindled, but no less symbolic of the burden they carried. Sarah nodded silently, clutching her sketchbook tightly against her chest. Her eyes reflected a mix of fear and resolve, the lingering echoes of the mirror room still haunting her thoughts. Despite everything, she trusted Clara's leadership and knew that staying together was their best chance of survival. With a deep breath, Clara turned the handle and pushed the door open. Bright sunlight poured in, momentarily blinding them as they stepped out onto a wide balcony overlooking a sprawling garden. The contrast between the dark tunnel and the vibrant colors of nature outside was jarring yet beautiful. Flowers of every hue bloomed in neat rows, their petals swaying gently in the breeze. A cobblestone path wound through the garden, leading to a glass greenhouse nestled at its heart. But something about the scene felt off. The air was too still, the birdsong too perfect. It was as though the entire garden existed in a bubble, untouched by time or imperfection. Even the scent of the flowers carried an unnatural sweetness, cloying rather than refreshing. "Welcome," came a voice from behind them. They spun around to see Mr. Pembroke standing near the doorway, his silver hair catching the sunlight. His expression was unreadable, neither warm nor hostile. "You've done well to reach this stage." Clara stepped forward cautiously. "What is this place?" she asked, gesturing toward the garden. "This," Mr. Pembroke said with a slight smile, "is the final trial before you face Arthur's ultimate test. Consider it a reflection of your journey so far." His cryptic words sent a shiver down their spines. None of them dared to ask for clarification, knowing full well that answers would only come through action, not explanation. Instead, Clara focused on the task ahead. "Where do we go next?" Mr. Pembroke pointed toward the greenhouse. "Inside you will find 3 mirrors. Each mirror represents a choice, one that will reveal your true self. Choose wisely, for the wrong decision may lead to failure." Without another word, he turned and disappeared back into the tunnel, leaving them alone once more. The trio exchanged uneasy glances, each silently wondering what awaited them inside the greenhouse. The greenhouse was unlike anything they had seen before. Its walls were made entirely of glass, allowing sunlight to flood the interior. Inside, lush greenery thrived in abundance. Ferns, orchids, and ivy draped over shelves and hung from the ceiling. But dominating the space were 3 towering mirrors, each positioned equidistant from the others. The mirrors themselves were framed in gold, their surfaces shimmering faintly as though alive. A note rested on a pedestal in front of the mirrors. Written in Arthur's familiar script, "To claim your prize, choose the mirror that reflects your truth. Beware, however, for appearances can deceive." Clara approached the first mirror cautiously. When she looked into it, she saw herself dressed in elegant attire, standing in front of a library packed with books. Children sat cross-legged on the floor, listening intently as she read aloud. The image radiated warmth and fulfillment, a vision of her dreams coming true. For a moment she felt tempted to reach out and touch the mirror, longing to step into that world. Daniel moved to the second mirror, his brow furrowed in concentration. His reflection showed him seated at a chessboard, surrounded by cheering crowds. Opposite him sat a younger opponent, a child whose face lit up with admiration as Daniel tipped his king in defeat. The scene stirred conflicting emotions within him. On one hand, it represented redemption. On the other, it reminded him of failures he'd tried to bury. Sarah stood before the third mirror, tears welling up in her eyes. Her reflection depicted her painting on a massive canvas, her work displayed in a prestigious gallery. Critics praised her talent, and admirers lined up to meet her. Yet, amidst the accolades, she noticed a shadow lurking in the background, a reminder of the insecurities that had always plagued her creativity. For several minutes, none of them spoke. Each was lost in their own thoughts, grappling with the choices laid before them. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "This feels like a trick," he muttered, stepping back from his mirror. "How are we supposed to know which one is real?" Clara nodded thoughtfully. "That's the point. These tests aren't just about solving puzzles, they're about understanding ourselves." Sarah wiped her tears away, her voice trembling. "But what if we choose wrong? What if we fail?" "We won't," Clara said firmly, meeting her gaze. "We've come this far because we've faced our fears and worked together. Trust yourself and trust us." Encouraged by her words, they took turns analyzing the mirrors more closely. Clara noticed faint cracks in the frame of the first mirror, barely visible unless you looked closely. Daniel spotted inconsistencies in the lighting of his reflection, suggesting it wasn't natural. Sarah traced her fingers along the edge of the third mirror, feeling a subtle vibration that set it apart from the others. "It's this one," Sarah whispered, pointing to the third mirror. "I think it's trying to tell me something." Clara and Daniel joined her, studying the mirror intently. Sure enough, when they looked closer, they saw tiny symbols etched into the glass, symbols that matched those they had encountered earlier in the abandoned village. This was the true mirror, the one meant to guide them forward. Taking a deep breath, Clara reached out and touched the mirror's surface. Instantly, the glass rippled like water, and the trio was enveloped in a blinding flash of light. When their vision cleared, they found themselves standing in a grand hall within Arthur's mansion. The opulent chandeliers sparkled overhead, and rich tapestries adorned the walls. At the far end of the room stood Mr. Pembroke, flanked by two assistants holding leather-bound journals. "You've chosen correctly," Mr. Pembroke announced, his tone approving. "Now comes the final challenge, the most difficult of all." He handed each participant a journal containing entries written by Arthur during his lifetime. The pages revealed his struggles, triumphs, and regrets, painting a vivid picture of a man burdened by wealth and loneliness. Some entries spoke of missed opportunities, while others expressed hope for the future. As they flipped through the pages, they couldn't help but feel a connection to the man whose legacy they sought to inherit. "Your task," Mr. Pembroke explained, "is simple yet profound. Write a letter explaining why you deserve this inheritance, not just financially but morally. What would you do with such power? How would you honor Arthur's legacy?" The instructions struck a chord deep within them. For the first time, they realized that winning wasn't about proving superiority. It was about demonstrating worthiness. With pens in hand, they retreated to separate corners of the hall to compose their letters. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the scratching of pens on paper. Clara wrote passionately about using the fortune to fund education programs and support underprivileged communities. Her words flowed effortlessly, driven by sincerity and purpose. Daniel focused on creating opportunities for young minds, channeling his love for strategy into mentoring others. Sarah envisioned building art centers where aspiring creators could hone their skills without fear of judgment. When they finally submitted their letters, Mr. Pembroke reviewed them carefully, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he nodded slowly. "You have proven yourselves capable of carrying Arthur's legacy forward. But remember, The greatest responsibility lies not in possessing wealth, but in wielding it wisely. With those final words, he ushered them into Arthur's study, where a check for $50 million awaited them. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she accepted it, overwhelmed not by the money but by the realization that they had earned it through courage, integrity, and teamwork. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the mansion in a golden glow. As Clara, Sarah, and Daniel walked away together, they knew their lives would never be the same. They had faced trials that tested not just their intellect but their hearts and emerged stronger for it. Somewhere Arthur Langston smiled, knowing his fortune was in good hands. The grand hall of Arthur's mansion was quiet now, save for the soft ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Clara, Sarah, and Daniel stood together near the massive oak doors, their hearts still racing from the weight of what had just transpired. Each held a copy of the letter they had written, their words etched with care and conviction. They knew these letters weren't just pieces of paper. They were declarations of intent, promises to honor Arthur Langston's legacy in ways that mattered most. Mr. Pembroke appeared once more, his presence commanding yet calming. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Setting them down on a polished mahogany table, he addressed the trio with a tone both solemn and encouraging. "You've proven yourselves worthy through wisdom, courage, and integrity," he began, his voice steady. "But this final step is not about competition, it's about reflection." He opened the briefcase, revealing stacks of documents tied neatly with ribbons. Beside them lay 3 keys, each uniquely crafted and gleaming under the chandelier's light. "These represent access to Arthur's fortune," Mr. Pembroke explained. "However, possessing wealth comes with responsibilities far greater than any material gain. Your task now is to decide how you will use this inheritance, not just for yourselves, but for others." Clara stepped forward hesitantly. "What do you mean by decide?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Isn't the money already ours, Mr.?" Pembroke shook his head gently. Arthur wanted more than mere recipients of his wealth. He sought stewards, individuals who would carry forward his vision of making the world a better place. You must choose whether to accept this responsibility fully or walk away, knowing that your actions define your legacy. Sarah glanced at Daniel, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "So, we can say no? Just leave everything behind?" "You have that choice," Mr. Pembroke replied simply. "But remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in impact." The trio retreated to separate corners of the room to think, each grappling with the enormity of the decision before them. For Clara, the choice felt clear. Her life as a librarian had always been about giving back, helping children discover the magic of books, guiding adults toward knowledge, and fostering a love for learning. She envisioned using the inheritance to build libraries in underserved communities, creating safe spaces where people could grow intellectually and emotionally. Writing her letter had solidified her resolve. There was no doubt in her mind that she would accept the responsibility. Daniel, however, struggled. His pride had often gotten in the way during the trials, causing friction with the group. Yet those same challenges had forced him to confront his flaws, the arrogance that masked insecurities, the fear of failure that haunted him even after years of success. As he reread his letter, he realized how much he craved redemption. Mentoring. Young Minds wasn't just about teaching chess strategies. It was about instilling resilience, patience, and humility, the very qualities he hoped to embody himself. Could he rise to the occasion, or would the pressure crush him? Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, her sketchbook open beside her. Her fingers traced the outline of a half-finished drawing, a vibrant art center bustling with creativity. In her mind, she saw laughter, collaboration, and inspiration flowing freely, but doubts lingered. What if she failed? What if the weight of such responsibility stifled her own artistic expression? Then again, hadn't the mirror room shown her that her fears were part of her journey? Maybe embracing imperfection was the key to unlocking her potential. After what felt like hours, they reconvened in the center of the hall. Mr. Pembroke watched silently as they exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of determination and vulnerability. Finally, Clara spoke up. "I'm ready," she said firmly, her voice ringing with conviction. "This isn't just about me, it's about what I can give back to the world." Daniel nodded slowly, his usual bravado replaced by quiet sincerity. "I won't pretend I don't want this," he admitted. "But I also know I need to earn it. If I take this responsibility, I'll do my best to make it count, for myself and for others." Sarah took a deep breath, clutching her sketchbook tightly. "I'm scared," she confessed softly, "but I think that's okay. This feels bigger than anything I've ever done before, and maybe that's exactly why I should do it." Mr. Pembroke smiled faintly, his approval evident. "Then let us proceed." He handed each of them a key along with a folder containing detailed instructions on managing the funds. "Remember," he added, "this is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning. Use this opportunity wisely, and never forget the lessons you've learned here." Weeks passed, and life changed dramatically for Clara, Sarah, and Daniel. Clara wasted no time putting her plans into action. Within months, construction began on a state-of-the-art library in a low-income neighborhood. Books poured in from donors across the country, and volunteers rallied around her cause. Children flocked to the space, their faces lighting up as they discovered new worlds within the pages of stories. Clara's leadership inspired countless others to join the movement, proving that small acts of kindness could ripple outward in profound ways. Daniel threw himself into mentoring programs, organizing workshops for aspiring chess players of all ages. But his efforts extended beyond the game itself. Through storytelling and strategy sessions, he taught participants the value of perseverance, teamwork, and self-awareness. Many credited him not only with improving their skills, but also with helping them navigate life's challenges. For Daniel, seeing the spark of confidence in someone's eyes became more rewarding than any trophy. Sarah transformed her dream into reality, opening an art center that quickly became a hub for creative expression. From painting classes to poetry readings, the space buzzed with energy and innovation. Artists of all levels found solace and encouragement there, free to explore without judgment. Sarah herself rediscovered her passion for creating, finding joy, and sharing her process with others. The shadow of self-doubt still lingered occasionally, but it no longer controlled her. As time went on, the trio stayed connected, supporting one another through triumphs and setbacks. They often returned to Arthur's mansion, sitting together in the garden where so much had unfolded. It became a sanctuary, a reminder of how far they'd come and the promise they'd made to carry forward his legacy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the mansion in hues of gold and crimson, Clara turned to her friends with a thoughtful smile. "Do you think Arthur knew what he was doing when he chose us?" Sarah chuckled softly. "Maybe, or maybe he trusted that we'd figure it out along the way." Daniel leaned back against the bench, gazing at the stars beginning to twinkle above. "Either way, I'm glad he did. Without this, I don't know who I'd be right now." They sat in companionable silence, letting the moment wash over them. Somewhere, perhaps in the rustling leaves or the whisper of the wind, they felt Arthur's presence, a quiet reassurance that they were exactly where they were meant to be. And so the story of Arthur Langston's hidden fortune came full circle. What started as a mysterious will and a series of daunting trials ended as a testament to human potential. Clara, Sarah, and Daniel proved that wealth, when wielded with purpose and compassion, could transform lives, including their own. Their journey was far from over, but they faced the future with hope, gratitude, and the unshakable belief that they could make a difference. Somewhere, Arthur smiled, knowing his legacy was safe.